Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody in between, welcome to another episode of the Chaps Chat Cats. My name is Jake. I'm joined by Sambo and Johnny, and we are part of the Hoops Crew Media Network. How are you, chaps?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Very well. Very well. How are you, Jake?
I'm excellent. Absolutely excellent.
Fantastic.
I love how Johnny looks like a small child in between our massive heads here on the screen.
We'll say I am a bit reclined back tonight. And I thought I might just recline back a bit tonight.
Oh.
Be a bit more relaxed.
Oh,
You want
lovely.
some of them pale
Chill out.
ales I left there, Johnny? You are.
No.
No, it's not a chance he's on any pale ales, Sambo, because if Johnny's putting anything past his lips these days, we know where it comes from. It comes from our great sponsor, Valhalla Brewing, the nectar of the gods, our network sponsor, and we thank Valhalla Brewing, deeply, professionally, lovingly, for being our network sponsor. If you are in North Geelong, why don't you do yourself a favour? Head over to the brew hall, and if you're in the CBD in Geelong, get along to the tap room. Valhalla Brewing, we appreciate their support on the Hoops Crew Media Network. Sambo, you and I will be headed down to G-Town to watch the Cats v Port this weekend. Maybe if we have a spare hour up our sleeves, we can nick along to the tap room and have a Valhalla brew or two. But chaps, before we get to next week, we've got to deal with this week. And on the show tonight, we've got Cats. Yeah, I know. Got to eat our vegetables first. We've got Cats v D's, the round 8 recap. It's like, I'll be honest, it's a dodgy sentence when you start saying Cat v D's. Let's just be honest about it.
Never a fun
this
visit
time.
to the vets. All right, it's embarrassing for everyone.
No,
Cat's
absolutely
embarrassed.
not.
Guns are embarrassed.
That's not. This is not how we raised our cat. And this isn't really what we expected from the Cats. They have a loss. Well, we thought it might come eventually this season, but they've finally had one. They've fallen short against the D's. So we're going to recap that in the public part of this show. Then we're going to nick behind the Hoops Crew Patreon paywall and do our month in review, rounds 5 to 8, the Kangaroos, the Lions, the Blues, and the Demons games. We're going to talk about those in total, how we felt that the Cats went over the last month. Did they meet or fall short of our expectations? Might even cast our eye forward to the month ahead as well. So if you want to see or listen to that part of the show, make sure you head on over and get yourself started on a 7-day free trial on the Hoops Crew Patreon page. You get early access to interview shows from Behind the Play with Paul. You get Wednesday news wraps with myself and Ben. You get extended versions of our podcast, the previews and the recaps, and you also get Patreon exclusive VFL women's and men's coverage of the Cats. I just dropped the VFL men's recap this evening. Talked a lot about Ted Closey and Emerson Jecker, Lawson Humphreys, amongst others. So go on over and start your free trial on the Hoops Crew today. But tonight, let's get into it, chaps. The Cats, they fall short of the D's by 8 points at the MCG. And chaps, it was an interesting old game, this one. I'll run you sort of through how it all went down just to sort of refresh your brain of how events unfolded. So we had the D's hit the scoreboard after just 1 minute and 14 seconds. That was Bailey Fritsch. The Cats answered. Tyson Stengel, I think, was that exceptional goal that he kicked? Was that his first one of the night? Ducking and weaving?
No, surely not. Maybe
Then we had... That was his second. Then we had Jacob Van Rooyen kicking it behind. The Cats answered with a couple of behinds of their own. Geelong hit the front. Ollie Dempsey slotting a shot from near the boundary. Harrison Petty responded, as he did so often during the night. Maybe not on the scoreboard, but in the marks column. And Pickett put the D's ahead at quarter time. The D's up 3-2-20 to 2-4-16. But there were, reasons to be happy from a Geelong point of view. We felt like Melbourne had played pretty decently, but the Cats were well in the contest. First goalless quarter in the AFL men's competition since was it last season? Only as far back as last season.
2022. It was.
Okay, so seasons ago.
They said on the podcast, yeah.
It was a behinds fest. 9 behinds kicked in the second quarter. Melbourne extending their lead by 1 point. They go into the sheds at 3-7-25 to 2-8-20 up. They kicked away a bit at the start of the third term. It was Harrison Petty with a behind, Petrarca with a behind, another behind for Petrarca. Then Cade Chandler kicks a goal to extend the margin out beyond 10 points. The Cats hit back. Tyson Stengel with a magical display of athleticism, dodging, weaving, kicking the goal. Ed Langdon winds back the clock to the first quarter when Ollie Dempsey kicked a great set shot goal from the boundary. He does that himself. Geelong hit straight back with Ollie Henry. There's a flurry of behinds, 1 to Max Holmes, then 3 to the Demons. The Cats, Ollie Henry kicks a goal after 21 minutes. Jai Clark kicks his first goal in the hoops after 28 minutes.
Ooh.
And the Cats go in the lead at 3-quarter time. A seesawing affair in the final term as Melbourne kick 5 goals straight. Geelong 3 goals too, so 5 scoring shots each. The D's kick the first 2 of the quarter to take a 10-point lead. Max Gawn and Bailey Fritsch. The Cats respond. Ollie Henry and Brad Close to put Geelong back in front. The D's kick away again with 2 goals to Pickett and Windsor. But this is where Geelong probably couldn't quite keep pace on the scoreboard. A behind to Jeremy Cameron, a goal to Zach Guthrie pulled it back to less than a kick. But then the goal to Bailey Fritsch responded with a behind to Jeremy Cameron. That was the final scoring of the evening as Melbourne get the job done. 10-14-74 to 9-12-66. An 8-point margin in the end. Sambo, going to come to you first. Then we'll handball to John. What were your initial thoughts, takeaways from this game against Melbourne?
I'm so prepared every time, and then every time you throw to me, I really go, well, it's complicated. Over
It's
to you.
game over. It's game over, man.
Yeah,
All finished.
all done. Doom and gloom.
All
Yeah.
done.
Now, look, I don't. I'm going. What I'm
Are
going
we
to try
frauds,
to do.
Sam? Are we frauds?
Absolutely, we're frauds. Been frauds for the last 20 years, mate. Don't you know? What I'm going to try not to do is make too many excuses, I suppose. But to get some out of the way, I suppose, is that there were some moments there where we really could have snatched it. Jeremy Cameron had those 2 goals that you'd probably put your house and all your investment properties if you had them onto him kicking those 2 goals, and he missed both of them. And Chris Scott alluded to the same thing in the press conference where he's like, if we had one more goal now, if they'd given us one more kick before the siren, you'd give it to Jeremy Cameron. So he's like, these things just happen. So it's that, but that's we talked about this last week of kicking accuracy is part of being the better team on the night. And if Melbourne had kicked straighter, they could have won by 30 points. If we had a kick straighter, we could have won by 15. But I think that is kind of the thing that has kept me buoyed even throughout it, was that we never let them kick too far away. I would say that Melbourne to me felt like the better team pretty much all night. Pretty much from the start. I just felt like it was Melbourne's game. I think it's been covered pretty extensively in the media how Melbourne were able to kind of stop Geelong from playing Geelong's game. So the game looked like a Melbourne game, and so they looked like they were in control of it. But again, the encouraging part was we never went away for a game that felt like it was against us from the first bounce. To only lose by 8 points, I think we did really well. I think we were off in a lot of areas, but only by a little bit. And this is some of the losses last year, when we were going on those string of losses, some of those felt not like they felt worse than this, but it was a similar thing where you went, it's only a few things that need to go our way and this could get back on track. And that game felt the same way. If we could get our inside 50s a little bit better, if we could get our pressure inside 50 a little bit better, but not much, just a little bit, then we could have really made that game ours. And as I said, we could have stolen it. I think if the game played out the way it did, but Jeremy Cameron kicks those 2 goals, I would have been ecstatic. But it would have been a steal. We definitely would have stolen those 4 points from Melbourne. So, I don't often, and I think you guys are in a similar boat judging by our chats. So I don't often credit the opposition too much, and I've been known even in Melbourne's premiership year, I felt like they were a bit overrated. Like I felt like they weren't quite as dominant as their record and the results showed that year. But in this game, I think this is one of the best games I've seen Melbourne play. Like I really thought that they, credit to them, they stopped us and they answered with their own game. And that somehow feels okay. Like it feels kind of good. It's a better way to lose a game to go on the night they were better. It's kind of more frustrating to go, oh, this has gone in. We could have done this. We didn't on that call. That umpire just did blah 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 blah. To actually go, they were just better on the night. I'm kind of at peace with that. So obviously there's a lot more to say, but just in general, kudos to Melbourne, and I can't wait to play them again.
Okay.
Johnny?
Very similar. It's like, during the game, a bit frustrated, a bit annoyed at the way the Cats were playing, some decisions not going Cats' ways, as you are every single game. Every single game you're going to be a little bit frustrated, but I got over it very relatively easily and quickly within the next 20 minutes after thinking about it and just going, well, Melbourne just came in with a game plan that they thought would work and they executed the game plan perfectly and they won the game. And I don't think the Cats can be disappointed in that. They'll be disappointed at the loss, but they also go, well, we know what teams have to do now to beat us. So it's something they can learn from, build on, get better from, and still to fall only 8 points down in a big game against a big side who's also, most likely a premiership team contender. It feels good to go, well, they're not far off the pace. They're not far off other teams. And it also felt like the Cats were not playing the best either. Like their skills and slickness going inside 50 and kicking at goal weren't at the same level that it has been all year. And even sometimes during the game, like through the middle, they're making a lot more silly errors. Like there's just those errors that you see happen sometimes during a game where it's just like, oh, that's something that might happen 10% of the time. But happening a bit more often. And I think that's also credit to Melbourne. And yeah, as I said, I wasn't, after thinking about it, not too stressed about it. It's just like, oh, that was just one bad game by the Cats because the opposition came with the plan, they executed the plan, and they got the chocolates. And yeah, I think it's probably one of the best games I've seen Melbourne play. And if they had to play at the absolute best to beat the Cats when we weren't at our best, I think says a lot to the Cats' ability to still play really good football when they're still struggling to hit the targets inside 50, and especially when the 2 key forwards can barely kick a ball straight at goals. So yeah, I think there's a lot more positive coming out of the loss that we can gain rather than negatives. And I think if you just got to step back, have a look, have a think, and go, you know what, we'll take this loss. I'll take this loss any day of the week. We're still 7-1. We still beat a lot of other teams that are around our level, so I'm happy.
I think that the Tom Hawkins thing is almost a microcosm of how people are feeling about this whole game, and to me, there's been a little bit of not overreaction. Overreaction makes it sound like I don't have any concerns with like how Hawkey's been, going, or the results on the field sort of thing. But I don't mean that. Like, I'm not an idiot. Like, you can't look at Hawkins and go, he's playing some of his best football. Or, like, I'm not trying to be positive for the sake of being positive and say, oh, Geelong played marvelously or anything like that. Like, of course, we had our issues on the night. I think an 8-point win to Melbourne felt entirely appropriate for the game that we watched.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think the thing with Hawkins too is that I took this back on Twitter a couple of times to last week against Carlton. Remember, Carlton lost and they were saying, oh, it was our injuries. There were so many tweets from Carlton fans saying, oh, but, we play them again in 6 weeks and we can't play much worse. So if that's what they got out of playing their best and we played our worst, well then. And we, Geelong fans, gave them absolute shite for it. So I found some of the stuff on Twitter this week just a little bit grating from the perspective of, hey, sometimes just credit the opposition and say the teams have been playing excellent defense on Tom Hawkins the last month. I'm not saying he's peak Tom Hawkins, but it also wouldn't be surprising to me if he turns around and kicks 4 goals against Port this week. Great players go through patches. I also have a feeling that, people were saying, bring Shannon Neal in, bring Shannon Neal in. I really do think that Hawkins and Cameron were both having off nights. They were both being well. Hawkins was being well held. Cameron had the opportunity to be a match winner for the Cats, but didn't execute his skills, which is, it is what it is. It happens. And the thing is, Hawkins was a Jeremy Cameron goal kick away from having set up a potential game winner at one point. The blind kick around the corner to find Cameron. He actually had his 3rd most disposals of the season, Hawkins, with 11 touches. Like, I felt like he continued to fight to see, even when he was being exceptionally well held. I think that's a lot to expect of a young guy like Shannon Neal. But, Chaps, I just wanted to go through a couple of stats for you because I did see some feedback on Twitter saying this was not a high-pressure game. Oh, sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, I just saw one reason why the Cats lost, and it's a big one. We had 2 players in front in the AFL Fantasy League, and we had a Cats player get over 30 disposals. So there's a game. There's a reason
every other team
lost.
that's played us has had the 2 leaders in AFL Fantasy and kicked more than had more than 30 disposals, and we beat them.
The only reason why we lost.
We should have benched Holmes at 3/4 time when he saw his stats. We should have benched him.
Yeah, exactly.
No more for you.
That's the only reason why we lost. It's not because the other team played a better game than us and played a strategy that worked against us. And it's not that we didn't take opportunities. It was just because of those 2 stats.
No, that's right. Curses
in the modern game, Johnny. These are the stats. So there was some people saying on Twitter it wasn't a high-pressure game. Geelong just failed to execute their basic skills. I would say to that, well, the numbers speak differently.
Watching that game.
You look at the pressure acts here. Oliver, 32 pressure acts. Viney, 25. Pickett, 24. Neil Bullen, 24. You got Bowes and Atkins with 24 and 23. Then you got Sparrow, 22. Chandler, 19. Windsor, 17. Melbourne had 7 of the top 10 players on the ground for pressure acts. They had about exactly the same, I think it was, for defensive half pressure acts. 6 out of the top 10. And tackles inside 50. You had 11 players on the ground in this game laid tackles inside 50. 9 of those were Melbourne players. We had 2 tackles inside 50 all night, Tyson Stengel and Tanner Bruin. Every other tackle inside 50 was laid by a Melbourne player. So I think this idea that it wasn't a high-pressure game, that Melbourne didn't really bring that much pressure, we just crumbled, we just didn't play well, I think that's a bit like Carlton fans last week saying, oh, we didn't play well, They wouldn't beat us if we played our best. Melbourne played really well. I actually think we competed pretty well in a genre of footy that we're not that built for.
Hmm.
We lose by 8 points because they were better at the
Yeah.
margins. Sambo, do you think they should have brought Gary Rowan in earlier than what they did?
I think they should have started him personally. I don't 100% know where. Like, I don't have an opinion on who goes out and who goes
comes
in.
out or
I'd have to have probably more of, and it's hard now in hindsight because I could pick whoever I wanted
Sure.
really and go bring him in. But I do think that I would like to have seen him play a full game, especially with the tackles inside 50. Like, did we had 2 for the whole night? Oh, I think you just
Yeah,
you
2
just laid
2
out
to
which
13.
players it was. I knew the overall stat. I didn't know who had laid them for us, but Gary Rowan tried a couple of times. You could see him do that, like that chase down. You thought it was going to happen. They disposed of it, and he kind of couldn't make it. Like, I thought he looked pretty fit and match ready, but I also thought you could tell that he hadn't had like a full half before what we saw. Like, he didn't feel like he'd played a full game of football. He still was sort of running his way into it. So I would have really liked to have seen him out there. I'd really like to see what he would have brought, because Melbourne was so structured in the back line. I really would have liked to see a player that could like make some chaos in there, especially with those high balls. Because this links back to Tom Hawkins as well, which I'm somewhat neutral on. Oh, Tom Hawkins is playing terribly versus Tom Hawkins is totally fine. I am someone who thinks that Tom Hawkins could have a rest. I don't think that would be the worst thing. I think giving him a rest and managing him, we're 7-1. He had people are going, oh, he hasn't kicked a goal in 4 games, but he had a great 4 weeks before that.
Sure.
So, like, it's not like the end, but I think he could have a rest. And you could bring Neil in, and you could go. The chances are we could go. Yeah, he still isn't quite 100% ready yet. He's got so much talent and potential. But I don't think he's going to do what Hawkins does, because even when Hawkins doesn't kick a goal, he brings so much to that forward line in terms of how much the opposition have to think about him, how much work the opposition have to do to take care of him, how much he does to try and set up other goals. His tap work up forward, and um, so even when he doesn't get a goal, I think he was still providing a lot. I think the thing during the game, I was like, I did, as we do, as football fans do. I said some things
Sure.
like, "Oh, give him a rest. Oh, Hawkeye looks
Oh,
good."
yeah.
Blah blah
Me
blah
too.
blah. But then, watching some highlights and thinking about it, I think it was the delivery to him. That's the amount of times he missed a mark, and you're like, Hawkeye, but it's because you want him to grab it. But when you actually look back to it, the delivery to him was not optimal for him. There was a couple of times when he leapt for it, and it looks like he mistimes it, but when you actually watch it, you go, actually, it's just it's weighted too much. It's gone just too high, just too hard. Hit him on the chest. He was on the lead. Why'd you kick it over his head?
Yeah.
hit him
You
bang in
made
the
this
bread
observation.
basket.
You made this observation about Stewart's kicking out of back 50 on the night, was that so bizarre to see him. It wasn't like he was overshooting guys by a meter, but he was just putting it too high
Yeah,
to make it
Yes.
uncomfortable.
yeah, too high and almost too hard or too wide. Like, talking about this when we're doing, when we're coaching our mini roos and the social soccer, and that I was talking about this just the other day. Of if you, I'm in a passing drill or in a game or whatever, and you kick it in such a way that your teammate has to like jog to the side or lunge or chase it, it's like that's
Mm.
not on them. It's not, you don't dispose of it and go, oh, my job's done, cool, awesome. Oh, they didn't mark it, they didn't stop it
Yeah.
if it's soccer or whatever. It's, you have to kick the appropriate kick, and I think there was a little bit of that, and I think that speaks to the pressure, which was what you were talking about, Jake. Because pressure and perceived pressure from Melbourne, I think we were over handballing for one. We had way fewer meters gained. Um, I don't know if the overall meters gained stat. I'd be interested to see that. But just in
I'll
terms of
see if I can
individual
find it.
players, like we had one player crack like over 550. and that
Yeah.
was Max Holmes. And then our next highest only was Zach Guthrie, and he only just cracked 450. And it drops. Like Melbourne have probably the top 6 or 7 in the top 10 for meters gained, which is unusual for Geelong's games lately. So I think our kicks were rushed because of the pressure, and we were, instead of doing that thing which we do, which is run with the ball in hand and kick ahead when we can, we were doing hand passes. It was almost like we were
Yeah.
going back into this unrefined and not optimized version of a 2007 Cats, where we suddenly were hand passing it as if that's our drill and that's our go-to game, and it's not. And that's credit to the pressure that Melbourne put on us. So very long-winded answer. Yes, I would like to see Gary Rowan play more. But I don't think the answer to any of this is just drop Hawkins. I think he still brings so much to the game. And if you put Hawkins out and brought in Gary Rowan, or put Hawkins out and brought in Neil, I think what that's going to do is allow the opposition to focus more on Cameron, Henry, Stengel, those kind of guys who are at the moment the ones doing the damage for us, even though Cameron didn't on the night.
Weird night not to have Parfitt in the team, John. I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was weird, but as I said during a preview, I just think it was one of those things where, like, no matter what happens, this is when we're resting these guys. And I'm still fine with it. I think I believe the Cats are doing its best. Sure, we could have played better with Parfitt, but also maybe he would have been the same. I don't think we'll never know. And, I'm not going to dwell on it too much because I think that's just, it's in the past, it's done. I don't think much would have changed with Parfitt in there because one player like Parfitt's not going to turn around the fortunes of everyone else. So is what it is, and I think they'll move on. I think they've moved on. Parfitt will move on, come in next week, I reckon, and probably play out of his skin. I think a few of these players will be playing a lot better next week. At home, GMHBA, Cardinia Park, sorry, haven't been there for nearly 3 weeks now. So it'd be good to get back to the old unfair advantage ground and hopefully smash a Port Adelaide. But yeah, part of the thing, I'd like to see him back this week. I think he will be back. And I think we'll see a few other players get rested. I reckon Tanner Bruin most likely won't be in this week because of that slight injury he had.
And he did drop a little bit after that. Like he didn't continue at the level that he had. So and I would be surprised if Clark gets 2 games in a row. Like I thought Clark did some really good things, but just with the way the Cats are playing, I don't know. What do you think, John? Do you think Clark will be in again next week?
I reckon he will. I reckon they'll stick him in, keep him in the side, as he played a pretty good game, and I think just getting that match fitness continuity into his game would be good for him, and why not? It's a fairly injury-ridden Port Adelaide, so it might be another good game for him to play, unless they want to take him up to Adelaide and go, oh, not Adelaide, Darwin, and go, we'll give you a rest this week for the Darwin game. Yeah, it's all that tricky stuff, but yeah, I don't think they'll do a Port Adelaide and bring in Tanner Bruin with a slight injury cloud. They're not that silly, not that they're not that short-sighted in going, oh, he's seems all right, let's play him. But yeah, Tanner Bruin will be out. And same as you, Sam, I'd like to see Rowan play a full game this coming Friday against Port Adelaide. I think Port Adelaide will be one of those teams that he could really tear it up, tear them apart. Same as Parfitt. Same as
But you don't know, because I thought Melbourne
Yeah.
would have been a team that you could do that to as well, especially after he did last time, and just with their structure behind the ball to get his sort of dare in there. I don't know if you got specific places to go now, Jake, but just talking about selection and injuries and whatnot, I had an item for the agenda.
Yes. Oh, the agenda.
Go for it.
Which is basically, there's been a lot of talk about one Reece Stanley after this game. He's been singled out a lot, and a bit like Hawkins. I think during the game, I think we were like, "Oh, he's getting a bath." I can't remember who said it, but like I did think he didn't look at his best, right? So this is what I want to
Sure.
pose. I think he didn't look at his best,
Okay.
but to me, and looking like definitely looking at the stats, like he didn't get towed up. Why is the narrative that like, or like Geelong has a ruck problem? Geelong needs to, sort this out. Max Gawn is the best ruck in the competition. He's maybe the best ruck of all time. Reece Stanley dropped the ball. To me, both of those narratives are a little at odds with each other.
I reckon it is just the way
like
Max Gorn played. I
Max
reckon
Gawn's
it's
incredible, and he
yeah.
had an incredible night. And I just want to know if either of you guys do feel that Stanley in some way let the team down. I'd like you to tell me how, because
I
I didn't really have a sense of watching it. I was kind of like, oh yeah, he doesn't look great, but I don't have like a real hard sense of what it was.
I think
And he won the hitouts. He won the hitouts against the greatest
yeah,
ruckman of all time,
I think to
supposedly.
single out our ruckman for playing a bad game amongst all the other players that also played, below their best is a bit silly and unfair on him, because I thought
Yeah.
he played decently. Like he was trying his hardest out. He won the ruck contest, but he was also just a player coming against one of the best rucks in the game. He had one of the best games I've seen Max Gorn play, and but it's tough coming against one of the best. And when he was playing, he was at his absolute best. So yeah, I
Mm.
think I don't. Yeah, I don't get it. Also, it's like
But what
just
about
don't
you, Jake?
single out one player when you could, just go. All these other players also had below par games to their own standard. Why aren't you saying these guys had bad games as well? Why is it
Do you
always
have
just Stanley?
some evidence? If you feel differently, Jake, do you have some hard this is what he did that he should do that he did not do?
It's a really weird one for me because I said in the first quarter, geez, I feel like Reese is giving Gorn a bath in the
That's
hitouts.
okay, yeah.
I was actually quite impressed by how Stanley was rucking early in the game. Now, if you look at some of the stats, you're right. It did win the hitouts 21-20. If you go and before people rage and type comments, I'm coming around to a point. 9 hitouts to advantage out of his 21. So nearly half of his hitouts went to the advantage of his team. Gawn had 5. So that's a quarter of Gawn's hitouts to advantage. We're in a really weird position where I think Stanley actually rucked decently in terms of the tap work, but in terms of the impact on the game, like he had 6 touches for 14 meters gained, 1 clearance. Gawn had 16 touches, kicked a goal, took 7 marks, 5 clearances. I think he was second most clearances on the ground, 231 meters gained. I just think that it's getting into that weird territory now where I feel like Stanley either rucks really well, but doesn't impact the game around the ground, or he impacts the game around the ground, but he gets blown out in the ruck. And I was kind of like, I didn't feel like it made a massive difference to our game on the weekend, to be honest. I wouldn't have
No,
looked at it and gone, pinned it on Stanley's, I think Stanley was beaten. If you go head to head, Gawn v Stanley, Gawn was probably in one of the best 2 or 3 players on the ground. Stanley definitely wasn't, but I wouldn't have pegged that as the smoking gun of why Geelong lost a game by 8 points, sort of thing.
No, it was symptomatic. Symptomatic of what was going on around the ground was the fact that Stanley could have a pretty decent night in the ruck and yet not bring the game back on our terms because of what was happening everywhere else, what was happening ahead of the ball, what was happening behind the ball. And I guess I would just I don't know. I don't know if I fall into this category of being like just an utter Reece Stanley defender. But I feel like I do. Like,
Okay, if you are,
I feel like I'm always
it's
I'm never bringing him up in a to talk about how good he is, but I am bringing him up when other people talk about him being terrible to kind of go because again the narratives are weird to me to go Geelong have, because this is what some things I've heard some media people who will go unnamed because we do not give them extra clicks this is what people have said. Geelong have a serious ruck problem. A serious ruck problem they need to figure out. Nobody's talked about that for the last 7 wins. And
Mm.
then in the same breath they'll say Max Gawn is one of, if not the greatest ruckman of all time. And Stanley gets overshadowed by that, and suddenly he's a ruck problem. And now the issue here is like, oh, Max Gawn's a ruckman for the modern age. He's doing great ruck work and all this other stuff around the ground. He's impacting. He's also their captain. Okay, so it's also not a fair like for like, because it's kind of like comparing Max Gawn to Stanley. You really want to compare Max Gawn to Stanley and Patrick Dangerfield rolled into one, because there's our match winning captain and our ruckman.
Yeah.
And for a long time, Geelong's problem was, they don't have a real traditional ruckman who can win the ruck hitouts. They've got all these pinch hitters, right? And Stanley was one of those people. And now people are kind of going, oh, he's just a ruckman. All he does is the hitouts. And I just feel like it's one of those weird situations where I'm not saying he had the greatest game. I'm really excited for Conway. I think as Conway plays in, Conway is naturally going to take over. Stanley is in what you would call the twilight of his tenure, but I just don't think it was this like disastrous performance, and he got his like pants pulled down by some young up and coming guy who had no right to. The fuck.
I'd say
the
No, you go.
effing I haven't dropped an F word in the public one for a while, and I dropped 97% of one. It got to the C, but not the K. I don't know. It's just weird to me. I welcome comments if people can bring out some too in the constructively say, hey, like there was these moments, there's this moment. I think the stats are misleading in this way or that way. Totally open to that. It's not that I'm 100% saying what he did. I'm just saying I don't see what other people are saying. So I'd like to be educated on that.
What's the solution though? Like, is it just bring Toby Conway in for the
Kneecap
rest
Max
of the
Gawn before the
season?
game?
Yeah, or bring Conway in and hope that he doesn't injure himself and ruin his rest of his career and derail Geelong's ruck even further. Yeah, I think.
But that's assuming there is a problem. My question at the moment is, I don't think there is a problem with the ruck. I think we are on our way to a new ruck setup, and I think Stanley is doing exactly what the club is asking him to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And he's doing it reasonably well. Now he runs a lot for a big lopin dude. We talked about in this week's past, where it's him that's running the ground. We talked about Close's work rate. Stanley's another one that just runs around the ground and never gets the ball. He's just pulling defenders and midfielders. And last night, our delivery, our delivery, not last night, on the weekend, our delivery and our movement going up the ground was not up to speed. So I reckon what you probably saw happen was Stanley wins the hit out, taps it to someone, it gets turned over, it goes back, Stanley runs back to the 50, and then we turn it over in our back half, and then we work it out of there. Stanley runs back through the middle of the ground all the way up to the forward 50. We get it up there, it turns over because Lever or May takes an intercept mark, and then Stanley's got to run. I think he was probably just running around all night and never getting a good look at the ball. I don't know. I just It's
I think
it's
I think a
weird to
lot
me.
of I think a lot of teams find they have a ruck problem when they play Max Gawn.
Yeah.
Like let's let a lot of people have a Jeremy Cameron problem when they play. Suddenly, people's backlines, it's like, oh my goodness, they've got a backline problem when Jeremy Cameron kicks 7 on them. It's like, yeah, look, I didn't think Stanley was incredible. I didn't think he would, but I think that's been his kind of his season. That's even when he's been at his best. I feel like he doesn't win you a bunch of games. At his best, he doesn't lose you a bunch of games. He kind of, sits somewhere in that middle tier of rucks, and that's perfectly fine with the way Geelong sets up. So
he may not have had his best game, but I also think that he, like you said, Sam, was running his guts out. He was in that forward line. He nearly took 2 marks that could kick 2 goals. There's so many instances where Stanley has those almost moments that could win us a game. So I think he's still playing excellent footy, and doesn't deserve the slack he gets.
I'll just say that though on that, the almost marks, it was an almost night for Geelong. And
Yeah.
sometimes sometimes I think it's fair to criticize of saying, if you're going to win a flag, those almost moments have to go your way. Like if that's a prelim final or something, that can sometimes be the difference. The almost moment is you cling on to the mark and you go back and kick the goal instead of you almost get it, but you drop it. Like Hawkeye had a few of those moments. And it's not to pile on and say negative, 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 but it's just like we lost a game by 8 points. It's a close game against a really good opponent. They played outstandingly well. I meant to make this comparison in the preview pod where I said Melbourne, to me, are the Rubik's Cube of the AFL. And you turn it one way, you turn it another way. Oh, I've almost got it. I've got to turn it again. They keep presenting fresh challenges to you all the time. They're very clever and disciplined with how they're coached. I think more than any specific player. If you think about players like Brad Close, Brian Myers, who was the other one who came to mind? Ollie Dempsey. There are 3 who sort of come to mind immediately for me. Tyson Stengel. I wouldn't have said any of those guys had a bad night or didn't run hard, etc. However, we didn't get nearly as much run through the middle of the ground on the counter-attack from those guys as we normally do. And I don't think it was because we weren't running hard enough. I think that when Melbourne turned the ball over in their front half and we would normally slingshot away 5 or 10 meters goal side of our opponents, Melbourne ran extremely hard and were extremely disciplined with their defensive roles. And they just ran shoulder to shoulder with us. They closed down so many of those attacks that would normally flow from a turnover in our back 50 down to forward 50. We're uncontested the whole way and we manufacture a shot in about 5 seconds. We just didn't get that many of those on the night. And then the few times we did, we were so under pressure. There was a fumbled hand pass. There was a hand pass that went slightly too far or too short of a teammate and it broke down. So I don't know. There's been some weird stuff. People are saying Jack Henry had a terrible night. I've just looked at his numbers and look, I know numbers aren't everything. And I think there's maybe one or 2 moments where I was like, oh, he probably got a bit beaten there. But gosh, these guys aren't alone. Like talk about cherry picking 1 or 2 players to go, you're crap. Jack Henry was right up there in terms of his spoils. I think he was 3rd on the ground for spoils. Only Mark Blixarves and DeConing had more for either team. He had 3 clangers. He had 4 turnovers, but again, 4 turnovers puts you way down in the middle of the pack. He faced 4 contested defensive one-on-ones, as many as Jake Lever. He lost 1 of them. Now, Lever lost none, but it's like, I don't get it. I think people have to point to one thing.
Recency biased of when he was on Bailey Fritsch and he kicked that free goal to win the game. They're like, oh, that's thanks, Jack Henry. You cost us the game there. It's like, well, not really. There was a bad turnover. They kicked inside 50. Bailey Fritsch a little bit quicker than Jack Henry. Just going to get him. They're probably a bit tired, and he kicked a freakish goal. I'm not sure what else Jack Henry could have done in that situation himself. Yeah, I agree with you. It's like you can't just cherry pick players who had a bad night because then you have to just pick the whole team because the whole team nearly had a bad night. There was a few players that still played really great games, played the absolute best, did everything that you could want, and then the others just couldn't step up to that next level. And I think it is just down to the way Melbourne played as well.
Yeah,
they definitely forced the Cats' hand to play a way that they're not used to. And back to Melbourne's good on Melbourne, give them credit for what they did, because what they did made Geelong play bad.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think what Melbourne did is the cause, and the symptom is that Geelong's system was interrupted, and Geelong's system didn't operate well, and that makes it look like a whole heap of bad performances. We don't want to come off like we're like, we're like saying, oh, they didn't try hard enough or like whatever. But like,
no,
I think Melbourne took it out of our hands, and I think there's answers to it. I think there is ways to outcoach that, and we just weren't able to do it in real time on the night. But just really quickly, because I know we've gone on, but there was a specific I wanted to talk about with part of what Melbourne looked like they did was, so with Carlton, when Carlton were pushing forward, the Cats are kind of happy for teams to move out to the wings, to come in from the side like that. They, like, you see that we don't, if they're getting a mark on the edge of the 50, like on the arc, but out wide, we don't even contest it. Jack Henry, Tom Stewart, Zach Guthrie, like Colin Jasny, that's in the playbook to pretty much just let them take that mark, and they can either kick an absolute freak low percentage goal from on the angle outside 50, or they can pop it in to our interceptors, and we're pretty confident in that situation, or they have to kick it laterally back out, and then again we're pretty happy for them to move it around the arc like that. And that's not what teams want to do, so we're kind of frustrating them into those areas. Whereas I felt like what Melbourne did was they willingly went out there, out wide, and they were actually set up behind and laterally from that point to kick it to those players on the to lose a bit of ground, but to chip it around, they were a bit more patient with that, to move it around and look for that perfect option. And what the other thing that did, if you go to the little corner point where the boundary meets the arc of the 50, if Melbourne were attacking down that way, where Geelong accepts teams to go, and Geelong managed to turn it over, Geelong's favourite thing to do there is to switch. And because Melbourne was set up back and across, it meant for Geelong to switch laterally from the defensive turnover, they had to kick it to contests that Melbourne had actually spread out. Melbourne weren't flooding and doing these little like quick hand passes down there to try and like work it into the 50. They'd kind of like just set up. Or it was almost a little bit more of like even when they were attacking, it was such a defensively minded attack that I can think of like twice where Geelong were able to kick from that area across the ground to a Holmes or a Close or someone, or Myers running through that area and move it out that way. And that's classic Geelong, to switch it laterally from the turnover. So I think Melbourne, the way they did that, set them up really well to patiently find the right spot to attack, and also just took away our favorite way to turn over and get out of there. So it was like that one thing. And I don't have any stats to back this up. I haven't looked at any heat maps, but that was just something that it looked to me like they were doing, and it was really, really frustrating to watch.
They were definitely a
I
lot
do
more
have some stats.
patient.
Okay, give us the stats.
Go with the stats.
Well, just quickly, it's not definitive, but I think it lines up with what you're saying. So Melbourne had 117 marks total. 117 marks total. We had 96 in total. That was up on both teams' season average, but Melbourne had 105 of those as marks that weren't intercept marks. Geelong had 83. So they outmarked us around the ground in non-intercepting situations by 22 marks. So I think that does lend itself to what you're talking about. They had worth 22 more kicks than us, which is interesting. 22 more kicks and 22 more non-intercept marks. And just a little additional note to what you're saying. I thought they kicked the ball. I thought their first goal of the night was indicative of how smart they were in terms of what they decided to do against us, which was do not kick it in high. Do not give Geelong's defenders anything to get under. It was a hurried kick. There was a bit of a dog straight out of the middle, and it was marked by Fritsch, who went back and slotted the goal. I thought the only times, not the only times, I thought the most frequent times they went long and high was when they were kicking down the line to put it on Harrison Petty, who would mark sort of around the ground. I thought when they went inside 50, it's not so much a lowering the eyes thing, but they just got the ball in at a lower trajectory, flatter, a bit quicker. And I think that takes out some of our high flying guys. It brings Fritsch into the game.
And for us to have out handballed them by 31.
Yeah.
That's highly unusual for us. So yeah.
Chris did mention that in the press conference, I believe. He said that, yeah, they
Yeah.
felt like they handballed it far too much and played into Melbourne's hands. And that's what it felt like as well. The Cats really did play into Melbourne's hands. And I think it was about halfway through the fourth quarter. I just had that feeling. Might have even been like the third quarter. It's like
Mm.
Melbourne just seems to have an answer every time we got a goal.
Mm.
They just seem to find a really quick answer, really easy shot at goal. And the Cats just weren't able to do that. And yeah, as I said earlier, credit to Melbourne. They
Yeah.
played a game that beat us at our own game, and credit to them. But next time, hopefully the Cats will fix that, and it'll be different. The tables would have turned.
I will my final
Mm.
bow on the overall game before we get to the to our votes and stuff is that looking through the stats, how even so many of them are reminded me of the thing that I was going to say, which is if both teams had kick straight, Melbourne still win. I'm not saying we win that game, we kick straight, but if both teams had kick straight, it would be a pretty fantastic game of football to have watched. Like I think the Melbourne did play so sort of defensively, and they sort of almost copped a bit of flack from people going, even Max Gawn and Simon
I
Goodwin
know.
said that in their respective presses, where they said it might not be the most exciting thing to watch, but it's how you got to beat a team like Geelong. Max Gawn said that today in an interview. He said, we're never going to outscore Geelong. Like just
Mm.
playing their game. So you might be the best to watch. But and I've certainly had a go at people that have played defensively or negative football before. But I thought in this instance, although they did do that, if both teams had kicked straight, it's still a pretty high flying kind of exciting contest. It's really just
Yeah.
how many bad misses both teams had that really compounds this sense of
Oh,
like,
that
ugh, immovable
Mm.
force versus immovable object versus immovable object.
that
But
second
it
quarter,
didn't actually feel
Mm.
like that.
that second quarter was just on a goal, like no goals being scored was a tough watch. But
Yeah.
I still looking back on it, I just think it was actually a really exciting, tough, tight game where it just felt like you don't know who's going to win.
Mm.
And
Mm.
whenever a team did get ahead by the other team was able to bring them back and beat them at their own game. Yeah, it's a good, exciting game, and unfortunately we lost it. But as I said earlier, I think I'm happy to lose
We'll
a
get him
game like
next time.
this. And if it is a game to lose, this is how I thought the Cats would lose it. Like fighting really hard to get the win, but just not getting there and just falling short. It hurts a bit more when it happens, but I also prefer it than getting absolutely smashed and not having any hope. Give me that little bit of hope
I
so you can really crush my spirit at the end.
I really think that people overblew like the watchability, like people were saying. It's disgusting half of football. I don't know. I just think people overreact to stuff all the time. Like I've said to you, Sambo, I've really enjoyed it. It was actually one of my favorite games of the season. Like,
Yeah.
um, and I sort of didn't realize that there was this reaction to it online, I guess. And
Mm.
then watching it, I jumped off and I drove. We had an hour's drive home from Mum's joint, and I was just talking to Jacko, and I said, I really actually like. Obviously, you don't like to lose, but I actually really enjoyed watching that game, and actually back to back weeks almost. Carlton Cats and then Melbourne Cats, two of
Mm.
my favorite games of the season. We just happened to lose one. It's an 8-point loss. Let's move on. Let's do some best on ground votes. We're almost at an
Let's
hour.
do it.
Let's do best on. Sambo, you run away with yours. Oh no, Johnny. I went with Sam
Whoa!
first on the other one. Oh, so Sambo, Johnny, you go first here. What are your votes?
My
1, 2, and
votes.
3.
Let me just grab them. My votes are that bloody loads. I gave him one vote to Zachary Guthrie. Thought some of those
Mhm.
terrific marks coming outside 50. That goal he kicked really boosted the Cats up, nearly snatch a victory. Yeah, I just thought it was a really solid game by Zach Guthrie again. One of the players that, he just continues to play good games every single week. 2 votes given to Max Holmes. another just outstanding game. But there's 31 disposals. That's what cost us. So I had to bump him down a vote just for that. But yeah, another brilliant game by Max. And another reason why so many teams wanted him, but just like in Borat, we go, you can't have this, you can't have this.
That's
And
right.
then I'm giving my 3 votes to Tom Atkins. I just thought that was a brilliant game by Tommy Atkins, classic bulldozer, chasing bulldog, just continued to apply pressure at all contests, and 11 tackles, few disposal. I don't have his stats, but I thought he played a
Do you know what
really
was
hard
cruel?
game.
It was bloody cruel to me that he was the one that got caught holding the ball that
Yeah,
allowed Melbourne to pretty much kick the winning goal. Like, he'd done so much. I think he had 11 tackles.
11 tackles,
Might have even had
22 disposals, 252 meters gained, 5 clearances.
It was unfair.
Another week with
But
22
he was the
disposals,
one.
he could have been our leading disposal getter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sambo, what about your votes?
That tackle, rundown tackle, when it happened, I was like, oh, Tom, you got to get rid of it quicker than that, blah, blah, blah. And, thinking throwaway comments of shit, you think sometimes. And I thought, well, what else could he have done in that situation? He backed himself to get away, and I'd rather the player back himself to break a tackle, get away, and play something a bit more risky than doing something silly and handballing it straight to a Melbourne player. Which he did in a way, but I'd rather it that way.
Yeah. I think he was trying to do the right thing. He was just like
Yeah.
half a pace off, which was exactly like we've said, exactly how the whole game felt the whole night.
Yeah.
Like kicks were an inch too high, our players are half a step off. just everything was just slightly off.
What about you for your vote, Sambo?
My one goes to Max Holmes. I think I've got the same players remixed. 1 vote to Max Holmes, 2 votes to Tom Atkins. Again, 22 disposals, 11 tackles, and just a real tone setter. Tommy Atkins, which I think he always is, but I thought he definitely did on the night. And my 3 votes are going to Zach Guthrie, I think led the not just the Cats, but the game for Mark. No, he led the Cats for Mark, but not. Sorry, no, Max Holmes had it equal.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, 9, 9, and I think Max Holmes is the only Geelong player to have more meters gained. 24 disposals for Zach Guthrie, which is really good, and also didn't break the 30, so didn't lose us the game. So
he knew what
and he kicked a goal. I just thought he's starting to get a bit of recognition, but even now, even with a bit of recognition, he's still such an underappreciated player. Like, everyone's so excited to have Cam Guthrie back, and rightfully so. But I don't know. I sometimes feel for him going. I feel like he gets lost in the fervor about his brother, and he's last week without Tom Stewart, and even this week without Tom Stewart a little bit. Like, Tom Stewart was there, but Zach Guthrie was probably more Tom Stewart than Tom Stewart was, and really kept us in the game for a lot of it. Like, I think the fact that we could have still stolen the points here, I think it was almost fully squarely on his shoulders and the work that he did, and the fact that he didn't just do it in the back line, but also moved up the ground, kicked a goal. I thought it was a terrific performance.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I've got the same 3 players. I think there's across the whole Hoops crew, I reckon it's pretty much the same 3 players in different orders, maybe 1 or 2 others. But I've got Tom Atkins with 1 vote. Echo just everything you guys have said. He was hard at it all night. I'd love if the next time we play them, we've got Parfy and Atkins. I think they work so well in tandem. Zach Guthrie with the 2 votes. That goal he kicked getting up the ground, just his confidence in himself to go forward and then snag that goal on a night where some of our big star forwards couldn't snare one, he goes and just bangs one through. I think it was on the left, wasn't it? And
Yep.
then Max Holmes gets my 3 votes. I think he's such a valuable player in this lineup. What he adds, the dash and run and carry off halfback. Yeah. And just to have half a meter more air under that shot for goal that he had. He can kick 50 meters easily, just a stab and it sails 50 meters. Maybe just a little more sauce on it, and we would have had a goal to was it hit the front or extend the lead, whatever it was. But yeah, I thought he's exceptional, and I reckon he would be in the running right now to be our player of the season for the Kaji Greaves medal. I reckon that he'd be well within that top 2 or 3 players for the Cats.
Definitely.
That's the direction I went.
Here's a funny stat between us 3.
Yes.
Just me, you, and Sam. Those 3 players all ended up with 6 votes each.
We dispersed them
Perfectly balanced,
Yep.
as all things should be.
And then we add Paul and Ben's,
Right.
and then it distorts a bit. But us 3, we got it evenly spaced, so they all had 6 votes each.
It's almost like we spend too much time together.
Exactly.
All right, that is all for this show. Cats VDs round 8 recap. We're about to go behind the Patreon curtain to talk about our month in review Cats rounds 5 to 8. So if you want to get that part of the podcast, make sure you go on over, start your 7-day free trial on the Hoops Crew Patreon network. Early access stuff like the interview shows with Paul, extended versions of our podcasts, Wednesday News Wrap with myself and Ben, as well as VFL women's and men's exclusively covered for the Patreon subscribers. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, go give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends. They'd love to hear from us. All right. Thanks very much, guys, for listening, watching, doing all that you do on your end of things. Until next time, go Cats.